5 Messerschmitt fighters circle above him like wolves. Their dark silhouettes cut across the pale sky at 18,000 feet. The sun flashes briefly along their wings as they maneuver into position, patient and controlled. They are not rushing. They do not need to. Below them, the American fighter flies alone. His P-47 Thunderbolt thunders through the thin air, its massive radial engine roaring at full power. The throttle is pushed forward until the lever can move no farther. The aircraft vibrates slightly under the strain. His wingmen are gone, lost somewhere in the chaos of the dogfight. Now it is just him, 5 German fighters behind him, and the sky stretching empty in every direction. He is 23 years old, and everyone once said he thought too much to be a fighter pilot, now thinking maybe the only thing keeping him alive. The year is 1943. The air war over Europe has become a brutal equation written in blood. Every morning formations of American bombers cross the English Channel, heading toward the industrial heart of Nazi Germany. Hundreds of aircraft fly in tight defensive formations, their aluminum bodies glittering in the sun like long metallic rivers flowing across the sky. Inside each bomber are 10 men: gunners, navigators, bombardiers, pilots barely out of school. Statisticians back in Washington have already calculated the odds. They do not say the numbers aloud, but the math is merciless. For every 100 airmen sent to England, nearly 30 will never return. And those numbers grow worse with every mission flown. After 10 combat sorties, the probability of survival begins to collapse. By 20 missions, the numbers start looking like a coin toss. Many crews never even make it that far. Fighter escorts try to protect the bomber formations, but the Luftwaffe fights over its own territory. German pilots know the skies above Europe the way farmers know their fields. Many of them have been flying combat missions since the beginning of the war. Some since 1939. They have experience, confidence, and deadly patience. They understand exactly how to break apart an American formation. The primary American escort fighter in 1943 is the P-47 Thunderbolt, a huge aircraft, heavy, rugged, built like a flying engine wrapped in armor. It can absorb punishment that would destroy lighter fighters. Its 8.50 caliber machine guns can shred almost anything in the sky. And in a dive, the Thunderbolt becomes one of the fastest aircraft in the world. But in a turning fight, the story is different. German fighters like the Messerschmitt Bf 109 and the Focke-Wulf Fw 190 are lighter and far more agile. They turn tighter, climb faster, respond instantly to control inputs. In the spiraling geometry of aerial combat, those advantages matter. German fighter doctrine is elegant in its simplicity. Force American fighters into horizontal turning battles. Let them bleed speed. Let them struggle against gravity and drag. And once they slow down, move in for the kill. American pilots know this. They hear it in every mission briefing. Never turn with a Messerschmitt. Keep your speed. Attack with altitude advantage. Strike fast. Climb away. Boom and zoom. Everyone learns the same lessons. Everyone reads the same manuals. And still American fighters fall from the sky. Because real combat rarely follows the manual. The 56th Fighter Group operates from muddy airfields in eastern England. Their Thunderbolts escort bomber formations deep into enemy territory. The pilots are young men from every corner of the United States. Farm boys, college students, mechanics, engineers. Some of them have never left their home states before the war. Now they fly across Europe with death waiting above every cloud layer. All of them have watched friends disappear in flames. Among them is one pilot who seems slightly different from the others. His name is Lieutenant Robert S. Johnson. He is quiet, polite, careful, and he asks too many questions. Half the squadron calls him classroom kid, not kindly. During briefings, Johnson sometimes raises his hand to ask about flight paths, intercept angles, or relative velocities during high-speed dives. The operations officers usually answer politely, but other pilots roll their eyes. Because fighter combat is supposed to be instinctive, quick, violent. A pilot who stops to think is often a pilot who dies. But Johnson cannot stop thinking. Before the war, he studied engineering at Cameron Junior College in Oklahoma. Physics fascinated him, not the abstract theories in textbooks, but the visible rules that governed how machines and objects moved, how a wing produced lift, how air resistance slowed acceleration. how gravity affected everything equally. One experiment had stuck in his mind. A professor once dropped a wrench and a marble from shoulder height at the same time. Both struck the floor together. Gravity, the professor explained, accelerates all objects equally. Mass does not change the rate of fall. Only air resistance interferes. Johnson never forgot that lesson. When the war began, he joined the Army Air Forces. Not because of adventure, not because of heroism, but because airplanes followed rules. Thrust, drag, lift, weight. Everything could be calculated. Everything made sense. Flight training did not come easily to him. Instructors described him as precise but slow to react. He tended to analyze maneuvers before executing them. In combat, instructors warned that hesitation could be fatal. A fighter pilot must act instantly, without thinking. Johnson graduated anyway, and in early 1943 he arrived in England to join the 61st Fighter Squadron of the 56th Fighter Group. The veterans examined him carefully. Young, serious, a little stiff. They gave him a nickname within days. Classroom Kid. His first missions were uneventful. He stayed in formation, followed instructions, avoided mistakes, but he did not score any victories. Other pilots sometimes shot down enemy fighters within their first few missions. Johnson simply returned to base each day with his aircraft intact and a notebook filled with sketches. Other pilots teased him. They asked what he was drawing. Flight paths, he explained. Intercept angles. Relative velocities during dive attacks. They laughed, not cruelly, but with the casual confidence of men who trusted instinct more than equations. One veteran told him bluntly, "Stop thinking and start shooting." Another joked that the sky was not a classroom. Johnson smiled politely, but he kept drawing, because he had begun to notice something. A pattern. German fighters almost always attacked in predictable ways. They positioned themselves at specific angles relative to the bomber formations. They dove with certain energy advantages. They maneuvered according to geometry. And geometry could be studied. Johnson believed the Thunderbolt possessed an advantage no one was fully using. The aircraft weighed more than 7 tons fully loaded, almost twice the mass of a Messerschmitt. That weight made it clumsy in turning combat. But weight also meant inertia. And inertia mattered when gravity entered the equation. Johnson began studying the aircraft's performance charts. He analyzed dive speeds, drag coefficients, acceleration curves. On paper, the numbers suggested something extraordinary. In a near-vertical dive, the heavy P-47 Thunderbolt should accelerate faster than lighter German fighters. Not because of engine power, but because of mass. The aircraft would simply fall faster. The idea sounded ridiculous. A vertical dive during combat was considered reckless. The airspeed indicator would slam into the red line. The controls would stiffen dangerously. The wings might fail. Pull out too late, and the aircraft would disintegrate against the ground. Pull out too early, and the pursuing fighters would still be there. Johnson mentioned the theory once during a briefing. The operations officer listened patiently, then calmly explained that such a maneuver would exceed safe operating limits and likely kill the pilot attempting it. The discussion ended there. Johnson accepted the answer, but he did not abandon the idea, because sooner or later, someone would be trapped in the sky with no other options. And when that moment came, the manual would not save them. Only physics might. And now, at 18,000 feet above occupied Europe, 5 German fighters are closing behind him. And the equations in Johnson's notebook are about to be tested, with his life as the experiment. For a moment, the sky becomes silent. Not peaceful, just empty. Robert Johnson glances around the canopy of his Thunderbolt, searching for movement. The bomber formation has gone somewhere to the north, swallowed by haze and distance. The rest of his squadron has vanished into the chaos of the fight. Now there is only sky, and 5 German fighters closing in behind him. He twists in his seat and looks back again. The Messerschmitts are climbing carefully toward his tail, spreading out slightly as they approach. Experienced pilots. They are not rushing the attack. They do not need to. 5 against 1. Time is on their side. Johnson's mind begins working through the possibilities. He cannot outclimb them. The P-47 Thunderbolt is powerful, but it is also heavy. In a climb, the lighter German fighters will simply follow and close the distance. He cannot outturn them either. The Messerschmitt Bf 109 was designed for tight, aggressive maneuvering. In a horizontal turning fight, the Thunderbolt becomes slow and vulnerable. Running straight, and level will not work. They will simply overtake him. And once they get within firing range, the fight will end quickly. The manual offers only one answer. Call for help. Evade. Buy time. But Johnson already knows that help is not coming. The radio is filled with overlapping voices, fragments of urgent calls, pilots shouting warnings and coordinates. Every other American fighter in the sky is already locked in its own battle. No one is free to help him. He takes a breath. For a moment, the fear fades beneath something colder. Logic. Calculation. The same quiet reasoning he used when sketching diagrams in his notebook late at night. He remembers the experiment from college. The professor dropping the wrench and the marble, both falling together, gravity accelerating them at exactly the same rate. The difference, the professor explained, came from drag. Air resistance slowed lighter objects more easily than heavy ones. And high above the Earth, where the air grows thin, that resistance becomes smaller. Johnson's aircraft weighs more than 7 tons. A Messerschmitt weighs barely half that. In a turning fight, the weight is a disadvantage. But in a vertical dive, it might be an advantage. He glances behind him once more. The German fighters are closer now. Still patient. Still confident. They expect him to run. They expect him to make the same desperate mistakes other American pilots make. Level flight. Shallow dives. Panic turns. Johnson makes a decision. He rolls the Thunderbolt inverted. The horizon flips instantly. Blue sky drops beneath him. The Earth rises above the canopy. For a brief moment, the aircraft hangs upside down between two worlds. Then Johnson pushes the control stick forward. Hard. The nose drops. The altimeter begins unwinding rapidly. The Thunderbolt falls. This is not a gentle descent. Not even a steep combat dive. This is nearly vertical. The Earth expands rapidly in the windscreen as the aircraft plunges downward. The airspeed needle begins climbing. 300 knots. 350. 400. The engine howls like a siren. Wind screams around the canopy. The entire aircraft begins vibrating violently as it accelerates. Johnson grips the stick tighter. His teeth chatter from the vibration. 420 knots. 450. The needle approaches the red line. If it climbs higher, something might fail. Control surfaces might flutter. Wing spars might crack. But Johnson keeps the nose pointed down. He glances behind him again. The Messerschmitts followed. 5 fighters diving after him with their cannons ready. They expect him to level out soon. Every pilot eventually does. No one dives forever. Johnson pushes the nose even steeper. The Thunderbolt is now plunging downward at nearly 80 degrees. The ground fills the windscreen. Fields become visible. Roads. Tiny villages. Details no pilot should see from this altitude. Behind him, something begins to change. The German formation stretches. Their spacing widens. Their dive angles begin to shallow slightly. Because they are trying to control their speed. Trying to keep their aircraft within safe limits. Trying to maintain situational awareness. Johnson is doing none of those things. He is simply falling. And the Thunderbolt accelerates faster with every passing second. 470 knots. 480. The controls grow heavy. Almost frozen. Johnson can barely move the stick now. His arms tremble from the effort of holding the aircraft steady. Sweat drips down his forehead and stings his eyes. But he cannot release the controls even for a second. Behind him, the Messerschmitts are beginning to lose ground. Their aircraft are lighter. Their airframes produce more drag relative to mass. In a turn, that advantage wins battles. In a vertical dive, it becomes a liability. Physics is now doing the fighting. And physics does not care about instinct. The altimeter continues spinning downward. 15,000 feet. 12,000. 10,000. The ground is rushing upward at terrifying speed. Johnson knows the moment to pull out is approaching. But the timing must be perfect. Too early, and the Germans will still be there. Too late, and he will become a crater. The altimeter drops past 9,000 feet. The aircraft continues screaming toward the Earth. And behind him, the Messerschmitts grow smaller. Not by much, but enough. Enough for the equation to finally work. Johnson glances back again. The Messerschmitts are falling behind. Not by much, but enough. Their dive angles have become shallower. Their spacing grows wider as they try to control their speed and keep their aircraft stable. The human body was never meant to fall toward the Earth at nearly 500 miles per hour. The altimeter spins downward. 8,000 feet. The ground is rising fast now, filling the windscreen. Johnson knows the moment has come. He begins to pull. Not violently. Slow and steady. The controls resist him. The stick feels like it is welded in place. Johnson grips it with both hands and pulls harder. The nose begins to rise. 1 degree. 2. 5. Then the G-forces hit. They slam into his body with crushing weight. His vision turns gray. The edges of his sight collapse into a narrow tunnel. Johnson tightens his stomach muscles and forces himself to breathe. He cannot black out now. 6,000 feet. The horizon slowly rotates back into place. The earth drops beneath him. The sky returns. The thunderbolt levels out, then begins to climb. Johnson gasps for air. His lungs burn. His hands shake violently on the controls. But the engine is still running. The wings are still attached. The aircraft is still flying. He looks back one last time. The German fighters are gone. Not destroyed. Not crashed. Just gone. Somewhere far above, leveling out or searching for the American fighter that vanished beneath them. Johnson is alone again. But this time he is alive. He turns west toward England. Fuel is low. Barely enough to reach the channel. The flight home feels strangely quiet after the violence of the dive. When he lands, Johnson taxis to the edge of the airfield and shuts down the engine. For several minutes, he simply sits in the cockpit, his hands still trembling, trying to understand what just happened. During the debriefing, he explains the encounter. 5 German fighters. A vertical dive. Separation achieved. No kills. But no losses. At first, other pilots are skeptical. A near-vertical dive to escape enemy fighters sounds more like desperation than tactics. But Johnson is alive, and 5 Messerschmitts are not chasing him anymore. That fact is difficult to ignore. A few days later, another Thunderbolt pilot tries the same maneuver. 2 German fighters trap him during an escort mission. He rolls inverted, points the nose down, and lets gravity take over. He escapes cleanly. The story spreads quietly through the squadron. Not through official manuals, not through mission briefings, but through conversations in ready rooms and dispersal huts. The P-47 Thunderbolt can outdive anything in the sky. If you are trapped, do not turn, do not climb, dive straight down. Let physics do the work. The tactic saves lives. Not hundreds, but enough. Enough pilots return home who otherwise would have died. Robert S. Johnson finishes the war with 27 confirmed victories, becoming one of the top American aces in Europe. But when he later writes about the war, he does not talk about glory. He writes about fear, and about the moment he trusted something invisible to save his life. Because in the end, the sky does not care about instinct. It does not care about bravery. It only cares about physics. And on that day over Europe, physics was on Johnson's side.